The suburban American classroom was immaculate, brightly lit, and utterly silent, a silence heavy with judgment. Mrs. Elena Santos, a newly arrived teacher from the Philippines, stood by the whiteboard, her smile professional but her hands trembling slightly. Her English was impeccable, grammatically flawless, a product of decades of rigorous Filipino education. Yet, when she spoke, her voice carried the distinct, melodic lilt of her homeland, the rhythm of Philippine English. And that was the problem. The parents, mostly successful professionals accustomed to a certain accent standard, started to complain almost immediately. They mocked her pace, her inflections, even her precise vocabulary. "She sounds like she's singing," one parent wrote to the principal. "Our children need to learn proper American English, not some foreign dialect." The principal, caught between parental pressure and Elena's obvious qualifications, was stuck. Quick, if you're a true, full-blooded Filipino who carries the spirit of Puso in your chest, show your support and subscribe to this channel right now. Let's continue. Elena, a veteran educator who had shaped the minds of hundreds of students back in Manila, was stunned. She had left her home, endured the complex, isolating immigration process, and sacrificed proximity to her family, all for the singular purpose of teaching. To have her entire professional identity reduced to her accent, the very accent that was a testament to her mastery of the language, felt like a deep, personal insult. She didn't respond to the complaints with anger. She responded with professional resolve and quiet dignity. She chose to let her results speak for themselves. The core of the parents' prejudice was a fundamental misunderstanding of Filipino English. They viewed any variation from their standard as a flaw, failing to recognize that the Philippine system produces some of the most proficient, adaptable, and articulate English speakers in the world. Filipino English is a dialect born of historical context and educational rigor, a tool of global commerce and communication, not a deficit. Elena knew her training was not just adequate, it was superior in its emphasis on grammar, structure, and clarity. She was determined to prove that the quality of education transcended the regional sound of the voice delivering it. She began her class by focusing intensely on the fundamentals that American schools often glossed over. Her lessons were structured, her expectations high, and her clarity absolute. She used literature to inspire, grammar to build framework, and conversation to build confidence. Slowly, the noise from the parents began to fade, muffled by the one thing they couldn't ignore: the progress of their children. The change in the children was not immediate, but when it became noticeable, it was undeniable. The first indicator wasn't their grades, but their confidence. Elena focused heavily on classroom presentation and verbal articulation, fostering an environment where mistakes were learning opportunities and expression was celebrated. Her students, who had previously mumbled or hidden behind shy hands, began speaking with a new assurance. They weren't just reciting facts, they were debating concepts, defending ideas, and articulating complex thoughts with a clarity and structure that surprised their parents. The parents' initial ridicule had centered on the notion that Elena would somehow contaminate their children's accents. What actually happened was a quiet revolution in their foundational skills. Elena's deep focus on precise grammar and classical sentence structure gave the students a robust framework for language that went far beyond casual conversation. They began correcting their parents' subject-verb agreement. They used vocabulary with a precision that was startling for their age. Their writing, once sprawling and unstructured, became tight, logical, and highly persuasive. They were speaking better English, not different English. One parent, an executive who had been particularly vocal about the sing-song accent, experienced a profound moment of realization. His daughter, struggling in previous years, delivered a detailed, impeccably researched oral report on local government. She spoke with confidence, corrected a technical term her father had used at the dinner table, and flawlessly fielded follow-up questions from the teacher. The father realized his daughter's success was directly attributable to the very teacher he had criticized. He saw that the accent, which he had judged as unprofessional, masked an intellectual rigor that was unparalleled. This realization was a turning point for the community. The focus shifted entirely from how Elena sounded to what her students were achieving. The children were testing higher in verbal and written skills than previous classes. They weren't just passing, they were excelling, prepared for higher education with a linguistic toolkit that set them apart. The mocking stopped, replaced by a grudging admiration, which soon blossomed into genuine respect. The parents began to understand that the globalized world demanded linguistic adaptability, and Elena was preparing their children for a world where clear, structured English was the currency of success, regardless of the accompanying cadence. Elena's methodology was rooted in the enduring strength of the Filipino educational system, which emphasizes the foundational rules of language over regional slang. She wasn't teaching American English, she was teaching global English, a versatile, rule-based standard that translates effectively across borders and cultures. This approach provided the children with a crucial cognitive advantage. They weren't just learning to speak, they were learning to think structurally in a second language. Her teaching style itself was a revelation. Filipino teachers are known for their inherent warmth, patience, and dedication, the malasakit that extends into the classroom. Elena created a learning environment that was both highly disciplined and deeply nurturing. She was firm on standards but infinitely patient with struggle. She viewed her students as extensions of a larger academic family, investing personal emotional energy into their success. This high-touch, human-centered approach was a stark contrast to the often impersonal, standardized testing culture that had dominated the school before her arrival. The shift in the classroom wasn't just linguistic, it was cultural. The children began to exhibit the characteristics associated with a global perspective, empathy, adaptability, and a genuine curiosity about the world beyond their suburb. Elena used her own journey as a lesson in resilience, teaching them that confidence comes not from conforming, but from competence. She subtly introduced them to a broader world, weaving in global literature and diverse perspectives, fostering a quiet respect for different ways of being. The ultimate measure of her success came in a district-wide competition focused on persuasive writing. Elena's class, which had been the subject of so much early controversy, swept the top awards. The winning essay, written by the daughter of that initially critical executive, was praised by judges for its uncommon clarity and rhetorical structure. When asked about her secret, the student simply said, "Mrs. Santos taught us that the rules of grammar are the rules of thought. Once you get those right, the words just flow." It was the ultimate vindication of Elena's methods and a public debunking of the parents' original prejudices. The transformation of opinion was nearly complete. The parents, who once organized meetings to protest her accent, now jockeyed for slots in her class. The principal, who had cautiously navigated the early complaints, hailed her as the most effective language arts teacher the school had seen in decades. Elena became a legend within the district, her methods studied, and her results celebrated. Her story became a quiet lesson in how prejudice often blinds people to competence. The parents realized they had been victims of their own cultural insecurity, clinging to an outdated notion of linguistic purity. They understood that the world their children would inherit was one where accents mingled, and that true mastery lay not in sounding American, but in speaking and writing with unassailable clarity. Elena had given their children a universal language skill, equipping them to compete and collaborate on a global stage. The sound of her voice had faded into irrelevance, the quality of her instruction had become everything. But the most heartwarming change was the profound, personal connection Elena forged with her students. They loved her. They sought her advice. They stayed after school to talk to her about their dreams. They didn't see a foreign teacher. They saw a brilliant, dedicated mentor who believed in their capacity for excellence. They learned to hear the gentle lilt of her voice not as an imperfection, but as the sound of wisdom and unconditional support. This phenomenon highlighted a critical truth about the American educational system, that it desperately needed the global perspective and dedicated human capital provided by Filipino teachers. Elena was one of thousands who came to America on teaching visas, filling critical gaps in schools across the nation. They brought with them a passion for the craft and a deep commitment to student success that proved invaluable. Elena's story, writ large across the country, is the story of how the Filipino educator quietly became a cornerstone of the modern American classroom, often enduring prejudice to deliver exceptional results. Elena Santos ultimately chose to stay in America, earning her permanent residency and continuing her impactful career. She eventually became a mentor to other foreign-born teachers, helping them navigate the challenges of cultural adjustment and bias. Her advice was always the same: focus on the fundamentals, maintain your dignity, and let your results be your defense. She taught them that competence is the ultimate rebuttal to prejudice. Her former students went on to college and successful careers, consistently citing her class as the foundation of their academic success. They carried with them not just perfect English, but an expanded view of the world, the quiet understanding that excellence can come in many different voices and rhythms. They learned the profound lesson that judging people by their accent is an act of self-limitation, denying oneself access to brilliance. Elena's legacy is not measured by the accolades she received, but by the generational shift she inspired. She took a moment of public humiliation and transformed it into a powerful educational statement. The mockery she faced became the catalyst for a higher standard of teaching, proving that the Filipino commitment to precision and malasakit is an asset of incalculable value to any nation. The American suburb that once sought to dismiss her now celebrates her. She didn't change her accent to fit their expectation. She changed their expectation to fit her standard of excellence. The parents learned that the truest measure of a teacher is not the sound of their voice, but the sharpness of their students' minds. The Philippine English that was once ridiculed became, through Elena's unwavering dedication, the sound of academic success and an enduring symbol of the indispensable contribution of Filipino educators to America. Subscribe if you are proud of Philippine and watch out for the next video.